The greenhouse was glowing again. To Theron, it was the only kind of magic he believed in anymore. At twilight, when the last slivers of gold kissed the glass and refracted across the strange foliage, the place looked like something out of a forgotten myth. The human crops, carrots, beans, tomatoes, were neatly sectioned along the left, while the right half was wild, alien, and pulsing with color and sound. That side hummed softly, like a low song just out of reach. He wiped sweat from his brow and adjusted the hose. Water beaded on the strange, petal-like scales of the Aurelian Midia bush, a species from Velsoon, according to the data files. It had taken 3 years of trial and error to get it to grow on Earth's soil, and even now it remained temperamental, refusing to bear fruit unless spoken to in rhythmic tones and given filtered water with traces of magnesium and lithium. He leaned down, brushing his fingers along one of the curling violet leaves. "Still fussy, huh?" The bush didn't answer, of course, but sometimes it felt like it wanted to. The only reason Theron even had Midia was because of the cooperation agreement signed 2 decades ago between the Interstellar Accord and Earth. Aliens didn't invade. They didn't colonize. They visited. They traded knowledge, crops, and in some rare cases, personnel. Humans who could prove their adaptability and skill with xenobotany were offered rare seeds. Theron had earned his through a project he submitted after losing his job in the city. It had started as therapy. Now it was a livelihood. The greenhouse had become a haven for both worlds. As he stood, brushing dirt off his hands, he heard a sound behind him. A light, clicking step, too crisp for any animal. He turned, eyes narrowing at the silhouette by the glass door. A tall figure stood poised at the threshold, draped in shimmering deep blue fabric that shifted with her movement. Her skin was pale opal, as if stars had been trapped beneath the surface. Her hair, long, gravity-defying tendrils that shimmered like moonlight over water, floated gently around her head. Her eyes, black and reflecting, settled on him with curious intensity. She opened the door silently. He blinked. Visiting hours ended 3 hours ago. "I'm not a tourist," she said, her voice low, smooth, and precise. Her common was near perfect, with only the barest accent curling around her vowels. "I am Nyrelia of Velsoon. My assignment includes cultural field observation. Your site was logged as primary point of Midia development on Earth. I came to see it myself." He stared for a second too long. Her presence crackled in the air like ozone before a storm. He hadn't been around many aliens before, certainly none this striking. "I'm Theron," he said, shifting awkwardly. "I grow stuff, obviously. You want a tour?" She tilted her head slightly. "I expected someone older." "Yeah, well, I expected someone not dressed like a high priestess." Her eyes widened slightly. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. Not a wide smile, just a curl at the corner of her lips. "I am a high attendant. Or was. Now I'm here." Theron rubbed the back of his neck. "Sorry, I'm terrible with titles." "Good," she said, walking past him. "Titles often block truth." He followed her deeper into the greenhouse. As she passed by each alien plant, she murmured something, brief, like a greeting. The plants responded in subtle ways. A ripple of color, a shift in leaf position, a small melodic chime from a blossom. "You're speaking to them," he said. "They remember their homeworld," she replied. "I remind them they are still seen." Theron looked around at the plants he watered daily, fed with care, played music for. He suddenly felt like a fraud. "They've done well under you," she added, sensing his sudden doubt. "These Midia, your species, should not be able to cultivate them. And yet, thanks. I talked to them too. Not in your language, just regular Earth rambling." She stopped before the largest bush in the far corner, its twisting branches heavy with unripe fruit, pale like translucent lanterns. She reached out, her fingertips hovering just above one. "This one's nearly ready," Theron said. "Another week, maybe." Without hesitation, she plucked it. "Wait!" She held it to her lips, inhaling its scent with reverence. "It tastes like home," she murmured. Then she glanced at him. You've never tried one, human? Theron blinked. Well, no. They haven't been declared safe for us to eat yet. Unfortunate. Her smile returned, more mysterious this time. You've brought a treasure to your world, yet never tasted it yourself. He shrugged. I'm patient. Besides, they're too rare to waste on curiosity. Curiosity is the root of all progress. Then, without warning, she extended her hand, holding out the glowing fruit, now pulsing faintly in her palm. Would you like to taste? He froze. Is this some kind of test? It's an invitation. He looked at her, then at the fruit. His heart thumped strangely. Won't it mess me up? She turned the fruit slowly in her hand. There are enzymes in the Aurelian Midia that resonate with nervous systems attuned to emotion and memory. For Velsoon, it enhances clarity. For you, it may bring images, feelings. No harm, just truth. His mouth went dry. What kind of truth? Only the kind that already lives in you. The fruit shimmered. He stared at it. Then slowly he stepped closer. His fingers brushed hers as he took it. It was warm, surprisingly so, almost like holding a heartbeat. He brought it to his lips and bit gently into the tender skin. The taste hit instantly, sweet, but layered with something deeper. It was like summer rain hitting warm soil, like laughter you hadn't heard in years, like the memory of someone brushing your cheek just before you woke from a dream. His knees nearly buckled. Nyrelia steadied him. What was that? He whispered. She was watching him intently. The Midia shows you what you miss most, what you need. It's different for every species. He sat down heavily on a nearby stool. I saw my mother's garden. From when I was a kid. I could smell it. Her voice too. God! She knelt beside him, graceful even in stillness. You've carried loss. I lost her 3 years ago, he murmured. Never thought I'd feel that again. The Midia doesn't resurrect, she said gently. It reminds, and in reminding, it heals. He looked at her again, this time without the distance he'd maintained since she entered. She wasn't just a visitor. She wasn't just beautiful or foreign. She was offering something ancient, vulnerable. He handed the half-eaten fruit back. You didn't have to share that. No, she said softly. I wanted to. Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them, like wind through tall grass. Not yet love, not quite infatuation, but the beginning of recognition. She stood slowly, brushing off her robe. I'll return in 3 rotations. I'd like to witness a full blooming. Will you bring another fruit? He asked, half joking. I will bring something better, she said, voice laced with subtle promise. A question. He watched her go, standing still even after she disappeared into the dusk. Outside, the wind picked up slightly. The greenhouse hummed its quiet song. The taste of the Midia lingered on his tongue, and in his chest, something had begun to bloom. Theron had never waited for someone before. Not like this. Not with a kind of expectation that curled around his ribs and tapped at the back of his skull whenever the wind shifted or the shadows bent just right outside the greenhouse. 3 days. He told himself it was nothing. Just a visit. A diplomatic observer with a fleeting curiosity about his plants. But the truth was more stubborn. It had dug itself into him like a root system. Since that evening, he had been restless. The taste of the Aurelian Midia still lingered, not just on his tongue but in the corners of his mind. Every time he stepped into the greenhouse, he expected her to be there again. Nyrelia, quiet and composed, with eyes that saw too much and said too little. She hadn't lied. On the 3rd day, just after the sun began to sink into the horizon and the greenhouse glowed like a captured aurora, she appeared again. This time, she didn't announce herself. He looked up from watering the Marith vines, an aggressive species known for latching onto anything warm-blooded, and there she was, standing just inside the doorway, bathed in golden light. She wasn't in ceremonial robes today. Instead, she wore a sleek field suit, form-fitting, practical, but still otherworldly in its elegance. Her hair was tied back, the luminous strands braided with tiny silver clasps. You're early, he said, setting the hose aside. Am I? She asked, tilting her head slightly. Time on Earth feels condensed. Unveil soon, moments stretch. Here, they race. He wiped his hands on a towel and walked toward her. Well, in that case, I'm glad you didn't wait longer. She stepped deeper inside. You've made changes. I added calcium to the soil beds. The Midia's roots are expanding fast, but the blossoms were turning pale. Thought I'd try strengthening the pH balance. She looked pleased, her gaze roaming the garden. They're responding. Their song is different now, more harmonious. Song. You can't hear it? She asked, glancing at him with a hint of mischief. Perhaps not with ears. Theron chuckled. You say things like that, and I can't tell if you're being poetic or literal. Why not both? She replied. He led her to the back of the greenhouse again, where the Midia bush had indeed begun to bloom. Its fruit hung like stars caught in dew, and the scent in the air was richer now, sweet, nostalgic, and slightly metallic. They're ready, he said. She nodded, reaching out to brush her fingers along the nearest branch. They recognize you. I don't think plants recognize people, he said. They do, just not in the way you expect. You give without demand. That's rare, even among my own. Her hand lingered on the fruit, but she didn't pluck it. You've asked nothing of me either. Should I have? Most do. Her eyes met his, dark and reflective. Curiosity, fear, desire. Humans are driven by questions. He smiled. Then where's yours? You said you'd bring one. She turned slowly to face him, stepping closer. Why do you live alone? The question struck him harder than he anticipated. He blinked, caught off guard. That's direct. I find it efficient. Theron looked away, shifting his weight. I guess I just stopped fitting anywhere else. The city felt too loud. The people too busy. I wanted something quieter. Something I could grow. He looked back at her. What about you? Why leave your world to wander Earth greenhouses? Her lips curved slightly. My people believe in immersion. To understand another culture, we must live as they live, not observe from orbit. I was chosen because I showed adaptability. Empathy. Does empathy involve handing strangers magical fruit and digging through their memories? I didn't dig, she said gently. I invited. You accepted. He couldn't argue with that. They walked the rows together in silence for a time. The breeze rustled the leaves, and distant insects chirped. Every once in a while, Nyrelia would pause, whispering to a leaf, a bud, a hanging blossom. The plants always reacted. It was subtle but real. A soft glow, a hum, a curling of petals. Theron found himself watching her more than the garden. The way she moved, like the gravity of Earth, didn't quite hold her the same. The way she touched things gently, like the world might bruise if she wasn't careful. At last, they returned to the central bench. She sat first this time, crossing her legs with fluid grace. May I ask something in return? Theron said. You may. Have you ever bonded with a human before? She looked at him, not blinking. Bonded. Not just worked with. Not just observed. I mean, really connected. Gotten close. The pause that followed was heavy with weight. No, she said at last. Our connections are sacred, intimate. To offer that to another species is rare. It requires risk, vulnerability. He exhaled. That's fair. But, she added softly, I find myself wondering. His heart skipped. About what? She didn't answer with words. Instead, she reached into the small satchel at her waist and pulled out something wrapped in a silken cloth. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing another Midia fruit. But this one was golden, not silver blue like the others. Is that different? He asked. This one was grown on my ship, from a seed I brought from home. It's more potent. Raw. He eyed it. You want me to eat that now? No, she said, and held it to her own lips. She bit into it. The reaction was immediate. Her pupils dilated. Her breathing changed. She closed her eyes, and her body swayed ever so slightly, as if caught in some unseen tide. After a long moment, she opened her eyes again, and they were wet. "I saw your hands," she whispered, "covered in dirt." And a laugh, "Mine, but not mine. The garden was larger, brighter. We were older." He froze. "I don't know if it was the future," she said, voice thick, "or a longing, but it was real, and it was warm." He didn't know what to say, so he just sat there, absorbing her words, his breath shallow. Finally, she stood again. "I will return once more," she said. "At the height of the moon, there is one final stage to the Midia's bloom. It must be witnessed by someone who has shared its truth." He rose with her, suddenly not wanting the moment to end. "And after that?" Her expression softened. "Then, we decide whether to continue planting together." And with that, she left, silent as starlight. Theron stood there long after she disappeared, surrounded by blossoms and the lingering scent of something deeper than perfume. Something ancient, something like hope. He touched one of the Midia blossoms and felt a pulse beneath his fingers. Something was growing, not just in the soil, not just in the greenhouse, but in him too. The wind that night carried a strange hum through the fields. Not a song exactly, but a resonance that made the glass panels of the greenhouse quiver as if in anticipation. Theron had barely slept. He kept returning to the memory of Nirelia's voice, her trembling breath, the way she bit into that golden fruit like it was a sacred vow. Her words haunted him. Not in a fearful way, but in the way something beautiful lingers, like the taste of something you've never had before but now crave deeply. And now she would return under the full moon. The final bloom, she had said. A moment that demanded presence. A witness he had prepared. Trimmed the leaves of the Midia bush. Strengthened the roots. Cleared a space around the central table, where the moonlight would fall directly. He'd even brought out a second chair, though it felt foolish, too hopeful, too symbolic. But when the moon finally crested the hills and poured its pale glow over the land, he wasn't alone. She arrived silently again, but this time Theron saw her long before she spoke. She walked through the grass like it bowed for her. Her suit shimmered with faint silver threads, barely visible except in moonlight, and her long braids moved like whispering serpents down her back. "I thought you might not come," he said as she approached. "I said I would," she replied. "And I do not break promises to those I consider important." The words struck him deeper than he expected. "Important," she gave a small nod. "You've become more than just a study, Theron." He stepped aside and gestured toward the glowing Midia. "Then let's see this bloom." They stood before the bush, the silver-blue fruits now gleaming with moisture. The petals around them vibrated gently, as though sensing the moon above. Nirelia approached first, her fingers brushing a leaf. "Would you like to do it?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "The final stage of the Midia bloom is triggered by intention," she said. "It responds to desire. It shows what the heart hides." Theron blinked. "Wait, this isn't just a plant, is it?" "No," she said softly. "It's a bridge. One used by my people during deep bonding rituals. When shared under moonlight, it connects two beings at their emotional core. But it does not lie, and it cannot be undone." He took a breath. "So if I touch it, it'll show you who I really am? It will show us each other, without pretense." He hesitated. The idea of being so exposed, so emotionally vulnerable, was terrifying. But when he looked at her, saw the quiet steadiness in her expression, the way she offered this without expectation or pressure, he stepped forward. He extended his hand. His fingers brushed the bloom, and the world vanished. Not like falling asleep, not like dreaming. It was as if reality peeled away, one slow layer at a time. He stood in a place that wasn't a place, lit not by sunlight, but by emotion. Everything had color but no form, shape but no substance. And then, before him, she appeared. Nirelia, but not the version he knew. She stood taller. Her eyes glowed brighter. Her skin shimmered with an iridescence like molten silver. And yet she was unmistakably her. "You're seeing me as I see myself," she said, her voice echoing gently in the air. And I'm? She smiled. Look, he turned. And there he was, a younger Theron, knees covered in mud, hands planting a small tree in a narrow strip of dirt behind a dilapidated apartment building. Children laughed in the background. The building was long gone now, but the tree, that was his first. Then the scene changed. His father's hands, calloused and gentle, showing him how to graft two branches together. Then his mother, humming softly, weaving flowers into a chain and placing it on his head. Memories unfolded like blossoms, not in a sequence but all at once. Emotions tangled, love, shame, hope, loneliness, longing. He looked at Nyrelia again. She stepped toward him, and suddenly her own past unfurled around her. A great crystal city beneath twin suns. She, young and uncertain, watching the elder diplomats with wide eyes. Her first mission, failure, disappointment. Then the moment she was chosen for Earth, not with celebration, but with whispers. Too soft, they had said. Too human sympathetic. And later, her alone, weeping beside a stasis pod holding someone she'd once called her mate. A being who could no longer wake. A bond broken by time. He reached for her. Their hands touched, and something inside them both surged. A feeling without name, deeper than affection, more raw than desire. Understanding, complete and vulnerable. When they opened their eyes, they were back in the greenhouse. The Midia blossom had withered, but the air around them pulsed with energy. Not electric, but emotional. Like the air after a storm has passed and the sky is somehow cleaner. Theron stepped back, trying to find words. I didn't expect all that. Nor did I, she whispered, her voice unsteady. But I welcomed it. He glanced at her hands, still trembling slightly. So what now? She looked up at him. Now we decide. Decide. If we will let this remain a moment, or become something more. Theron stepped forward. I don't want to go back to how things were before you came here. She tilted her head. You fear being alone again? No. I fear being apart from you now. Silence. Then she smiled. A slow, soft smile that made her eyes shimmer. I never intended to bond with a human, she said. Guess you didn't expect to meet one growing alien fruit in a greenhouse either. She laughed. The sound was delicate, musical, and entirely real. I will need permission, she said, to stay, to live among humans. But if I ask, and if they grant it, would you have me? He stepped closer, his heart thudding. I already do. And then, in the quiet glow of the moonlight, surrounded by the sweet ghost scent of the Midia bloom, she leaned in, her forehead pressed gently to his, a gesture that meant something to her kind. A touch that spoke of trust and something beginning, not as diplomats, not as plant whisperers, but as two beings who had seen each other's hearts and found peace there. The next few days unfolded with a strange new rhythm. The greenhouse was no longer just Theron's sanctuary. It had become theirs, even if unofficially. Nyrelia returned each evening, sometimes with her data tablet, sometimes with rare seeds or bizarre instruments she wanted to show him. They would talk late into the night, laughter blooming between stories, silences growing soft and comfortable. Something had shifted after the Midia bonding. It wasn't just a feeling. It was tangible. Theron noticed the way he moved differently around her now, unafraid to stand closer, to let his fingers brush hers when handing her a tool. And she, in turn, no longer kept that diplomatic poise around him. She smiled more freely, teased him about his stubborn approach to soil acidity, even reached up to fix a strand of his hair when it got caught in a vine. But it wasn't all effortless. Her kind had rules, boundaries. 2 days after the bloom, she stood in the center of the greenhouse holding a small device shaped like a silver petal. This is a link to my delegation, she said, fingers curling around it. I'm supposed to report tonight. My term on Earth ends in 5 cycles. 5 days? Theron asked, though he already knew the answer. She nodded. If I do nothing, I'll be retrieved and replaced. If I make a request to stay, I'll need a reason stronger than research. He stepped closer. What if the reason is us? Her eyes searched his face. Would that be enough? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned, walked to a corner of the greenhouse, and returned with a small wooden box. Inside, nestled in dark velvet, was a dried Midia seed. One that had not bloomed during the ritual but had instead fallen, whole and unbroken. I found this the next morning, he said. It didn't open with the others. It stayed sealed. She took the box carefully, as if it might fracture. Unusual, she whispered. Why would it remain closed? I think it's waiting, he said, for the right time, or maybe for the right place to grow. Their eyes met, and just like that, her fingers tightened around the petal-shaped device. I'll make the request, she said. The answer came the next evening. Approval. But with a condition, she would no longer be a diplomat, no longer bound to alien protocol. She would be a free entity, living under Earth's common law. Her people had never permitted such a thing before. But the bond with Theron had triggered an emotional wave the delegations couldn't ignore. There was strength in it, curiosity, perhaps even hope. The first few weeks after that were a blur of change. Paperwork, interviews, negotiations. The media caught on, an alien choosing a human not for diplomacy or science, but for something personal. Their faces were broadcast, dissected, discussed. But in the eye of that storm, the greenhouse remained untouched, sacred. And slowly, as the noise died down, life began. She didn't move in all at once. A few items at first. A glowing orb that regulated humidity. A cluster of soft tapestries with patterns that shifted in the dark. Then, one day, she brought a single strand of glowing blue vines and draped them along the entrance like a curtain. Theron watched them sway in the breeze and smiled. It's starting to feel like a home, he said. Nyrelia stood beside him, her expression unreadable. We don't use that word, she said softly. We say corehold, the place your spirit anchors. I like that better, he replied. Corehold. He reached into the wooden box, pulled out the sealed Midia seed, and held it between them. Shall we? Together, they pressed the seed into rich soil. They watered it with a mixture of Terran rainwater and a glowing liquid Nyrelia extracted from a crystal. And then they waited. It didn't bloom right away. Days passed. Then weeks. Seasons shifted. Leaves fell, snow came, and still they waited. In that time, they learned each other more deeply. He discovered that her favorite food was not the Midia fruit, but something called Zelnia syrup, which she swore tasted better over Terran bread. She discovered he had a terrible singing voice but hummed perfectly when he thought no one was listening. They argued once fiercely over whether a particular hybrid species should be allowed to grow unchecked in the wild. They made up by replanting the entire row of it, hands muddy, hearts honest. Then one morning, as the first golden haze of spring light kissed the greenhouse glass, Theron woke to find Nyrelia standing barefoot in the dirt. The Midia seed had cracked. Not like the others. Not with glow and spectacle. It had grown upward, not out, but toward them. A thin stem curling gently into the shape of two intertwined tendrils. One silver, one green. It didn't bloom with color. It shimmered with quiet light, a pale warmth pulsing from its center. It's bonding, Nyrelia whispered, voice thick with awe. But not to the sky this time. To us. Theron stepped beside her, placing his hand on the soil. The warmth intensified, not burning, but radiant, like sunlight stored in a heartbeat. I think it's a sign, he said. It's more than a sign, she replied. It's an echo of what we created together. Their hands found each other. No fanfare. No crowds, just them, a greenhouse, and a single blooming promise. Later that year, people would come to visit the plant. They would ask questions. Some would come seeking answers about interspecies bonds. Others would just be curious. But none of them would understand the full story. Not unless they stood exactly where Nyrelia and Theron stood. Not unless they loved the way they loved, gently, truthfully, without needing to be alike. Years would pass. The world would change, but the Midia bloom would remain, growing taller, wrapping itself around the greenhouse beams. And beneath it, Two hands, one alien, one human, would always be found working the soil together, creating, becoming, blooming, forever anchored at the core hold.